Tonight, we are going to talk about a war that never stays on the battlefield, a war that doesn't stop at trenches in eastern Ukraine or missile strikes on distant cities. Because while the world watches destruction, displacement, and death, something else is happening quietly, efficiently, and profitably. The Russia-Ukraine war has created winners, not heroes, not saviors, winners. Wars always do. And this war, perhaps more than most in modern history, has reshaped global power in ways that few ordinary people fully understand. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the immediate narrative was simple: aggression versus sovereignty, invasion versus resistance. But beneath that moral clarity, a far more complex reality began to unfold. Energy markets shifted overnight. Arms industries surged. Political influence was redistributed. Old alliances hardened. New dependencies formed. And some countries found themselves stronger, richer, and more strategically powerful than they were before the first shot was fired. Let's be clear about something right from the start. Benefiting from a war does not mean causing it, but it does mean adapting faster than others. It means knowing how to turn chaos into leverage. And several countries did exactly that. The first and most obvious beneficiary is the United States. Publicly, Washington framed its role as defending democracy and international law. But strategically, the war delivered outcomes American policymakers had discussed quietly for years. Europe's dependence on Russian energy collapsed. NATO, once described as brain dead, was suddenly unified, expanded, and energized. Countries that once questioned American leadership rushed back under Washington's security umbrella. U.S. arms manufacturers saw unprecedented demand. Advanced weapons systems flowed into Europe. Defense budgets across NATO exploded, and much of that money flowed directly into American defense companies. This was not coincidence. This was structural advantage. At the same time, American energy producers stepped into a vacuum Russia once dominated. Liquefied natural gas shipments surged across the Atlantic. Europe, desperate to replace Russian supply, paid premium prices. The result was not just profit, but influence. Energy dependency shifted from Moscow to Washington. For the United States, the war weakened a strategic rival without deploying American troops. Russia was isolated, sanctioned, and militarily strained. Europe became more dependent. NATO grew. From a cold strategic perspective, Washington achieved objectives it had failed to secure for decades, all while presenting itself as a reluctant participant responding to crisis. Then there is China. China's position has been quieter, more calculated, and arguably more sophisticated. Beijing did not openly back the invasion. It did not openly condemn it either. Instead, China watched, waited, and extracted advantage. As Russia was cut off from Western markets, China became its economic lifeline. Russian energy was sold east at discounted prices. Trade shifted toward yuan-based systems. Russian dependence on Chinese technology and financial infrastructure deepened. What sanctions did was not collapse Russia. They redirected it. For China, this was a strategic windfall. A weakened Russia became a junior partner. Beijing gained leverage over energy supply, trade routes, and diplomatic alignment. And while the West focused on Ukraine, China expanded influence elsewhere, in Asia, Africa, and the global South, presenting itself as a neutral power while quietly reshaping the global order. The war also distracted Washington, and distraction in geopolitics is opportunity. India is another unexpected beneficiary. Officially neutral, India refused to fully align with Western sanctions. Instead, it bought Russian oil at deep discounts, refined it, and in some cases sold it onward at market rates. This was not ideological alignment with Moscow. It was economic pragmatism. India strengthened its energy security, protected domestic growth, and signaled independence from Western pressure. At the same time, it maintained strong ties with the United States and Europe. The result was diplomatic flexibility, a powerful position in a divided world. Turkey also emerged stronger. A NATO member with a complex relationship with Russia, Turkey positioned itself as mediator, gatekeeper, and power broker. It controlled access to the Black Sea. It hosted negotiations. It balanced relations with both sides. While Europe fractured and Russia isolated, Ankara expanded its regional relevance. Energy transit, arms exports, and diplomatic leverage all increased. Turkey did not choose a side. It chose influence. Even some European countries, despite suffering economic pain, found strategic gains. Nations like Poland and the Baltic states saw their warnings about Russia vindicated. Their political standing within NATO rose sharply. Defense investments poured in. strategic relevance increased. And then there are the industries, the quiet beneficiaries that do not wave flags or give speeches, defense contractors, energy traders, commodity exporters, reconstruction firms already positioning themselves for post-war Ukraine. For them, war is not ideology, it is business. Meanwhile, the costs are borne elsewhere. Ukrainians pay in lives and cities. Russians pay in isolation and economic decline. Ordinary Europeans pay higher prices. Global food security suffers. The global south absorbs inflation and instability. This is the brutal truth of modern conflict. War redistributes power upward. Those with leverage gain more. Those without it lose everything. And this is why understanding who benefits matters. Because wars do not just end when the fighting stops. The structures they create last for decades. Alliances harden. Dependencies deepen. Power shifts silently. The Russia-Ukraine war is not just a regional conflict. It is a global reordering event. And while the cameras stay fixed on the front lines, the real transformation is happening elsewhere, in boardrooms, ministries, energy terminals, and arms factories. The question is not whether countries benefited. The question is whether the world is willing to admit it. Because once you understand who gains from war, you begin to see future conflicts more clearly. And that is where this story is really heading. As we move further into this story, the scale of advantage becomes clearer. Because benefiting from war is not only about immediate profit or political gains, it is about positioning for the next decade, for the next crisis, for the next negotiation where leverage counts more than morality. The countries profiting from the Russia-Ukraine war have already started reshaping global power quietly, efficiently, and in some cases, almost invisibly. Take the European Union, for example. While the war has driven inflation, energy shortages, and social unrest across the continent, it has also accelerated a profound transformation. European nations, forced to wean themselves off Russian energy, have invested billions into renewables, infrastructure, and LNG imports. Long-term energy independence, technological upgrades, and regional cooperation are emerging as byproducts of crisis. The painful short-term costs mask a strategic gain. Europe may emerge more resilient, diversified, and geopolitically cohesive than it was before the invasion. Meanwhile, the United States continues to play the long game. The war has revitalized NATO, expanded its influence, and strengthened Washington's voice in European security decisions. The U.S. has positioned itself as indispensable, not just militarily, but economically, diplomatically, and strategically. Nations that once questioned American leadership now defer to it on critical decisions. Washington's leverage in international institutions has grown, and its messaging on democracy versus authoritarianism finds renewed credibility. Even without deploying vast armies, the U.S. has scored strategic victories simply through economic sanctions, military aid, and narrative control. China, however, operates differently. Its advantage is more subtle, patient, and potentially far more consequential. By maintaining a careful neutrality publicly, it has avoided sanctions, preserved trade opportunities, and projected itself as the ultimate pragmatist in a divided world. Russian dependency on China for energy, finance, and technology has grown, creating a shift in the regional balance of power. Beijing's influence over Moscow increases with every passing month, every shipment of discounted oil, every yuan-based transaction. For China, the war is less a conflict than a strategic laboratory, testing Western resolve, exposing vulnerabilities, and quietly redrawing influence maps in Asia, Europe, and Africa. Other nations, often overlooked in mainstream narratives, are quietly harvesting advantage as well. India, for instance, has leveraged the conflict to secure energy at discounted rates, strengthen strategic autonomy, and demonstrate diplomatic independence. By refusing to fully align with Western sanctions, it preserved its ties with Russia while enhancing its global reputation for pragmatic neutrality. India's economy benefits, its political position strengthens, and its ability to maneuver on the global stage expands, all while others argue about ideology, law, and morality. Turkey has done something similar, but with an added layer of sophistication. Ankara controls key maritime choke points, hosts negotiations, and balances its relationships between Moscow, Kyiv, and Washington. By refusing to fully commit to any side, Turkey has transformed itself from a regional player to a crucial mediator. Its influence over Black Sea trade, arms sales, and diplomatic solutions positions it as indispensable. In this war, Turkey is not a combatant, it is a power broker, quietly rewriting the rules of engagement. Beyond countries, the war has created enormous economic ripples that favor specific industries and corporations. Defense manufacturers, for instance, have seen orders multiply. Missile systems, drones, armored vehicles. Demand has surged not just in Europe, but globally, as nations anticipate the next potential conflict. Commodity exporters, too, have found opportunity. Grain producers in the Americas benefit as Ukrainian crops face disruption. Energy traders profit from the volatility of oil and gas prices. Even reconstruction firms are quietly positioning themselves for the eventual rebuilding of war-torn regions. In each case, the war is a catalyst, transforming chaos into profit. The uncomfortable truth is that the beneficiaries of war are rarely those we see on the front lines. The families displaced, the soldiers killed, the cities destroyed. These costs are paid by ordinary people. Meanwhile, advantage flows upward to those with foresight, capital, or strategic leverage. War redistributes wealth, influence, and power, and the world's most skilled actors know how to ride that redistribution with precision. Even more striking is the shift in alliances and dependencies. Russia, isolated from much of the West, now depends on China and India. Europe, shaken by energy insecurity, depends on the United States and new suppliers. Countries that were passive observers suddenly find themselves pivotal. The war does not just redraw maps in Eastern Europe, it redraws power structures globally. Lines of influence shift silently, subtly, and with lasting consequences. And the moral calculus? That is often the final layer. Countries that benefit economically and strategically from the war often cloak their actions in principle, defending democracy, promoting stability, or acting in national interest. But the reality is rarely that simple. Profit, leverage, and positioning often outweigh ideology. The world's most powerful nations are adept at navigating this complexity, and the Russia-Ukraine war is the ultimate case study in modern realpolitik. As we look ahead, these gains are unlikely to be reversed. Once strategic dependencies are created, once diplomatic leverage is achieved, once economic advantages are realized, they do not vanish with a ceasefire. The world is entering a post-war era even before the war ends, where influence, access, and power have been permanently reshaped. Those who benefited will consolidate, those who suffered will rebuild under new constraints, and the story of winners and losers will outlast headlines, speeches, and media cycles. In the end, understanding who benefits from the Russia-Ukraine war is more than just an exercise in economics or politics. It is a window into the mechanics of global power. It reveals who has foresight, who can adapt, and who can transform crisis into opportunity. And it reminds us that in a world of conflict, advantage rarely aligns with morality, and influence often resides with those who act quietly, strategically, and decisively. Because wars are not only fought on battlefields, they are fought in boardrooms, in energy markets, in diplomatic channels, and in the quiet corridors of power where decisions are made long before the first shot is fired. And in this war, some nations, some industries, and some leaders have positioned themselves as the undeniable beneficiaries, shaping the world in ways that will last long after the smoke clears.